Welcome again to AI Mistakes. Tonight on the live broadcast, we're going to think deep. You see, in today's fast-paced world, the AI just keeps coming. There are new announcements and discoveries, new models. We've talked about agents, we've talked about services, developing apps, thinking through ideas. And here's the thing. What's important about all of these discoveries? What do they all have in common? I think it's really all about thinking. So tonight, I want to slow down and think about thinking. Hi, I'm Daniel Lemire, founder of AI Mistakes, and just want to welcome you to the broadcast today. There's a lot going on in the AI world. There seems to be a constant flow of new models, and we really just need to take a moment and think about what's been going on in the world and how we got here. And it's really interesting when you take a step back. I took some time this week to go back through some of the AI papers that I've been reading over the last couple of years. And it really is interesting how these ideas keep resurfacing. Now, I've not been in the AI research space for a very, very long time, like some of the folks that work at OpenAI and some of the big thinkers. But I have been reading about AI for quite a long time, and there's some really interesting ideas that are out there. And this idea of reasoning is one of those things that is really sticky. What do I mean? We've been trying to find ways that we can better understand a problem, that we can think through a problem, that we can take advantage of the thought process that we have to work through and solve. And when you take a step back and you look at sort of where we've been just in the last couple of months of this year in terms of the discoveries, the sheer volume of change that's come about, there was a lot of talk over the last couple of weeks about DeepSeek and how it's affected things. There's a huge market reaction in the US, and it was really all about, what is the future of compute and the demands for that. And that had an impact that was very different than what the rest of us thought would be the case. But I feel like we haven't come back to the really big deal behind DeepSeek. And so I touched on it a little bit in the last conversation with the OpenAI updates to O3, which again, there's been some more updates, but I'm not going to focus on that tonight. I really want to focus on this deep thinking sort of revolution that we're in the middle of. I mean, it's hard to know when OpenAI names a product, but the other thing that they released this week was this deep research. So there's this theme of deep and thinking. And the more I have spent time really focusing on this, it really does change everything. Well, what do I mean? Well, shortly after I spent the weekend really playing with DeepSeek R1 and trying to understand what this thing was that had been released, I took a look at the paper that was posted on the GitHub, and there were a few really great insights from the paper. And I made some comments on social media. I talked about how we were going to be talking about distillation more and how prompt engineering was going to go away. And, really the other major thought that came through for me was what the future is going to be in terms of the local compute and how we're going to operate and work with these models. But even my digestion of the DeepSeek R1 paper, shortly after having spent the weekend on it, was not really deep enough. It didn't go far enough. And I've been reading what some others have thought, and I think this is really a bigger deal than it's been exposed in the media to a large degree. And that's what I want to focus on in today's program. So let's just start with the big one. I think it is something that is something you and I can actually take advantage of from a prompt engineering standpoint. And it's this first pull out statement in the DeepSeek paper. And I'm actually going to pull up the DeepSeek paper so we can kind of thumb through it a little bit, because there's quite a few really nice kernels in here, and it's really worth digging into. I want to say, I think the details that are published in this paper are really good. Obviously, there's been a lot of debate about, is this really an open source model or not? And I don't think it's an open source model. Yes, they've released the weights, but it's not fully open source because we don't know what they've trained the model on. That hasn't been disclosed. But I do think that the details that were released in this paper are pivotal, and they do have a great big impact. And I think the DeepSeek team should be really proud of the work that they've done, even if they've distilled it from the likes of OpenAI's model. And I think it's pretty clear that they have. This is going to be a trend going forward. It is unavoidable. We are going to be in a future of distillation no matter what happens. And these this final statement here in the opening of the paper was really the part that gets me personally excited. This is goal of to support the research community. They've open sourced it, and they didn't have to make it this easy to deploy and work with. But this is what got me excited, because now I can take it around with me wherever I go. I don't even need my big workstation rig to do something really useful. And so the other thing I want to do on tonight's broadcast is I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can get this onto a machine and start using it. I do think that we are in the middle of a major shift in terms of compute hardware. I recently got a new Apple MacBook Air M3 with a lot of the inbuilt memory. The architecture that Apple has used with their new processors, I think, is pretty essential. We're going to see more and more AI-based processors. It's all going to be ARM-based processing, and you're going to see more and more onboard memory, because you need that hybrid footprint to be able to load the model and work with it. But DeepSeek is even having a major impact on that. But this is what really does deserve some attention. They made it really easy with the quantization for you to consume it, and then they based it on both Qwen and Llama. So whichever one that you prefer is something you could take advantage of. So hang around in the broadcast, and I will take you through a couple of different ways that you can easily deploy that. And as we go through the paper, obviously the benchmark is a big deal. They're bragging about the benchmarks. The thing is, the DeepSeek model does not have to be the best for it to be really, really useful. And every week when I go through and prepare for the YouTube broadcast, I customize the background. It's one of the fun things I get to do. And I'm still using Midjourney for that, because I can quickly iterate. I can have an idea, I can see what it looks like, and I can make a decision about it. That quick turn, that quick feedback loop that you can build in working on something is really essential. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing with these improvements of the models. And as they go through the introduction, they giving you a little bit of history. And of course, they are giving some credit to OpenAI and their O1 model. I mean, that really is the cutting edge. Like it or not, OpenAI has proven time and again that things are possible, and others have come along with them. And there are discoveries all over the place, but I do think that we wouldn't be here were it not for OpenAI. And that's a really critical and important point that we have to take along with us. So here's a couple of really interesting details. As they're getting into this, they're talking about the various methods, the post-training, the distillation. It's a ton of context, and I think it absolutely is necessary. They're talking about the benchmarks that they're using. And again, we've got to have benchmarks so we can understand where things are. But there's nothing really particularly astounding in those introductions. Where things start to get really interesting is when they start talking about DeepSeek R1 this reinforcement learning on the base model. And the first real major deal here is this statement, this without any supervised data. And this is really essential. Why does this matter? Without any supervised data, basically with doing the work on DeepSeek R1 what happened is we've been using this RLHF methodology for quite some time, right? What does that mean, right? We have been doing work with the algorithms to understand and reinforce by learning the models. And the way that that's been happening is setting up some basic rules, right? Using this reinforcement learning process that tells it when it's doing the right thing and tells it when it's not doing the right thing. And then we've injected human feedback in that to train the models. That was really the revelation that OpenAI put into things as they were developing GPT. It was that feedback process that made things happen. Well, what DeepSeek did is they got rid of the human feedback. There is no human feedback in what they built. Now, it's my view that they couldn't have gotten to that point without having the human feedback basis that was in the other models that they were distilling from. They've taken good information. They've started with something that looks pretty good, that has been adjusted and tuned with human feedback to identify the things that we care about and that matter. And then they took that a level lower and took the human feedback out and just started spinning that reinforcement learning. So it is a pure reinforcement learning process, and that allowed them to iterate a lot more quickly. It took a lot of the manual steps out of it. That's a really big deal. Now, I'm not a math guy. I wish I could tell you that I can look at these equations and really deeply understand and explain this, but I can't. I need somebody else to explain it to me. I know some of what's going on here, but not well enough to explain it to all of you. There are, there's parameters involved here. There's outputs, there's averages and means, and there's a lot of statistical things. Look, I'm not the guy that you want to come to for all of your big data and analytics things, because what I want to focus on is how we can actually use this stuff. And this is the part that I get excited about. This is the prompt. That's the part that you and I can use, the part that we can take advantage of to make real things happen, to think about the world that we live in. And of course, all of this prompt is enabled by all of this math. Like, without this math, the models are not a thing. So I don't want to discount that. I'm not dismissing it, but that's not the part I want to focus on, because that work has been done, and there are people that are in that data science space, and they're improving the way that these neural nets work, and that's very important. But where you and I can apply our own initiative is to think about how we're using these tools. And this is really the first thing that I think is really important, because we focused for the last couple of years on a lot of very low level individual task focus. The best models have been instruct models. And here over the last 6 months, we've really shifted. Really, it began with O1, thinking bigger, where you're explaining what it is that you want to achieve, and the model is doing the work to extrapolate and figure out what needs to be done. And what the researchers at DeepSeek discovered was that if they started to use this think tag and the answer tag, they were actually able to get a very different kind of result. Now, what we don't know is how long ago this sort of reasoning discovery was made by the likes of OpenAI. There's a lot of speculation about this. I think that this discovery is something that was not novel to everyone. I think OpenAI had some inclination around this. They figured some of this out, and that's what drove the release of O1. They just didn't tell anybody. They didn't release it. They didn't write a paper about it. It was not publicly shared in great detail. But that's what the DeepSeek team did. So they kind of stole OpenAI's thunder a little bit here by getting this out there. And as soon as they started applying this think and answer, really interesting things started to happen. And this is where the breakthrough comes. As we go through, we're seeing the performance is really good. It's doing very well on the math. Again, with the benchmarks, they're comparing it to the accuracy, how it dramatically improves with the steps, and is even getting to a point where it is doing better than the earlier versions of O1. And that is an achievement not to be dismissed. They continue to evolve it. And then they're talking about the length of the responses and how they're getting not just good answers, but they're getting good thinking in getting to the answers. And this is really where the breakthrough comes out, because as they're going through this process, they're looking at mathematical problems, they're using that. And we have seen in the past with these models across the board, the foundation models have improved when we bring in other things that help the model put the pieces together. What do I mean? There was a real interesting situation that occurred a couple of months ago where you were actually able to leverage the OpenAI model and tell it to use symbols instead of the written English language. And that allowed some really next level things to happen. And it is this sort of conglomeration of evolution that has, I think, driven a lot of this discovery with DeepSeek. I think they were observing what was happening out in the real world, and they started to connect the dots. And what they discovered in continuously iterating on the model with the mathematics was this occurrence of an aha moment. Well, what does that mean? What's this aha moment thing? Well, let's go to a question. So again, it's working on a mathematical problem. It's doing the thinking portion of this, where it is taking step by step, it's looking at the equation, it's refactoring and stepping through, right? It's going to square both, it's rearranging to isolate. And as it's going, and they've highlighted this in red for us, wait. There's an aha moment I can flag here. Oh boy, what does that mean? Let's reevaluate. Isn't this interesting? This is the model going through something in a way that is very human. It's rethinking using an anthropomorphic tone. I don't think I've ever seen that before. What a novel and interesting discovery. Now, again, has OpenAI discovered this before? I don't know. Is this really novel? Well, it's novel to me from a paper perspective, because this is the first paper I've seen that talks about this concept. But it's very important because they stumbled across a thought process. And this is what really got me excited about DeepSeek when I was playing with it, because I had never seen this before. Not only had I not seen it before, I'd not seen it on the small scale. Like, I could take it around on a computer and use it to learn and converse. This was way more interesting. And, what's really even deeper is I remember a couple of years ago watching a TED Talk. They were going into detail about what they were able to do with artificial intelligence. And they had discovered some things about being able to identify pictures that were of a certain type. And I'll have to go and find the TED Talk and maybe link it in the comments below if I can find it over the weekend, because it was very interesting. What they disclosed at the end of this TED Talk was that they built an AI model that was really great at finding dogs. And they started to really dig in to say, well, how does it know what the dog is? Like, we don't understand how it's come to this conclusion. And what they discovered was that there was some commonality in the bottom corner. The bottom corner of the images had some random, I think what I would consider a random conglomeration of pixels that it was actually using to determine if it was a picture of a dog. And so The model was actually wildly inaccurate because it was not doing a recognition of the dogs. It just found another feature that happened to be in common that led it to be successful at identifying the dogs. And that's one of the things that we're doing with all of this AI. You're finding and solving mathematical problems that are in common across a set of things. And that's what ultimately drives that. Now, we've continued to grow the parameters, and that has led to us being able to solve and classify information in entirely new ways. So it's not a worthless method, but even in the very early days, there was this acknowledgement that we didn't understand what the AI was doing. And so we've been seeking this explainable AI. And now we have explainable AI because we can actually see exactly what it's thinking. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The drawbacks of DeepSeek R1 they found some really great things. But one of the things that they actually had happen was poor readability and language mixing. It would drop in and out of different languages. So they said, well, I wonder if we could fix that. Maybe we could fix that. And they developed this reinforcement learning with a cold start. So basically, they said, well, can we make the reasoning performance better? And can we give it some high quality data to help guide it? This is, you've seen with some of the more inferior models, the smaller models, where you could actually do few shot examples, where you would give it a cluster of really good examples of what it was that you wanted it to do, and it was able to give you a really high quality result with a model that was not nearly as good. And so they kind of used some of those ideas to make a more coherent chain of thought, and it worked. The cold shot actually worked. And so they started bringing in more cold start data to get there. And that's ultimately what allowed it to happen. Now, this current DeepSeek R1 model is entirely based upon their DeepSeek V3 base. So that is a critical development. You cannot get to DeepSeek R1 without DeepSeek V3. And I completely missed DeepSeek V3. I didn't even know it was a thing. It didn't come across my radar at all. But they were able to use and connect these dots to get to a point where they were able to improve the data and then use the reinforcement learning training to get there. And that's really the big deal. And as they went through all of that coverage, as they continued to feed in that reasoning data, it began a virtuous cycle and made it better and better. And so then they thought, well, if we can distill this with some reasoning capabilities, some really interesting things could happen going forward. And that is the part that I am actually really excited about. So before I go any further in the presentation, I think we need to jump over and actually take a look at what it takes to install this on a system. Now I'm using my desktop system to do the broadcast. We'll see if this works well or not, but let me just pull it up here and let's take a look. I've talked on the channel before about a program called Pinocchio, and this is Pinocchio. I run it on a regular basis to do all sorts of experiments. You can see I've got tons of things that are installed here that I've been playing with over time, just because it makes running experiments really easy. And I've been using Ollama in a lot of different ways. And of course, you can go download Ollama and install that. But actually, what I would recommend is we have these two really great packages in Pinocchio. So if you go to pinocchio.computer, that's Pinokio dot COMPUTER. The link is in the comments below. If you have not installed this yet, it really makes it easy because it does all of the background setup of your environment. It does the environment setup in Python. It installs all the good stuff. You have to monkey with the controls on both the Mac and Windows to make sure that it knows it's okay to install it. This is not malware. You do have to be aware of what you install from a packaging standpoint, but they are making it really easy. Cocktail Peanut is actually the guy on X that I came across that has done all of this work, and he's really built a great community around the product. And you can discover all of these packages and quickly install them. Browser Use is another one that I'm particularly excited about, and I need to do some more experimenting with that before I come on the channel and show it to you in greater detail. But that's how we get to the other OpenAI product release, which was Operator, that lets you do AI agent browsing. I'm really excited about that one because we're already at a significant level of functionality with Browser Use, which is totally open source. But anyway, I digress. So we've got two great packages here. We've got Chatbot Ollama and OpenWebUI, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like to install each of these. Now I'm going to download this, and it's going to do all of this installation work for you, which is really wonderful, because as soon as I pick on the package, right, all I did was go in here and I searched for that package. I pulled up the package I wanted, and now I'm just going to hit install. And in the background, it's going to do all of the work for me. Like, I don't have to go find any of these packages. I just have to sit here and wait on it. It is going to take some time to run through this, and it will be running in the background, but it's doing all of the heavy lift. And they're constantly updating Pinocchio. The packages are being updated. One button installs for all of this stuff. I mean, if you are serious about playing with AI and really learning from your mistakes, this is going to save you from a lot of mistakes getting it installed. Now, the downside here, of course, is that this is a bit of a crutch. You don't have to do the work. Somebody else is doing all of the work for you, and that means you can focus your mistakes on something else. But if you want to know how to install and configure all of these things, it's not going to tell you how to do that. But you can look behind the scenes and understand the commands that are being used to build this. So that is really powerful. And I'm going to come back to my browser session here, and I want to show you what's happened as a direct byproduct of DeepSeek. Of course, we have the actual DeepSeek website here, where we get the full fidelity, the billions of parameter. This is talking to the servers in China. And I was kind of running some experiments, and I thought, how can I demonstrate really what's going on here? Because maybe not everybody is fully seen or appreciated actually what's going on. And now this is not the local version, because I'm comparing it with the other cloud compute programs like Gemini, OpenAI, Claude, and Perplexity. And there is a significant amount of benefit here because it's doing all of that compute. But as it's doing it, right, it thought for 71 seconds about this question I asked. And I was kind of vague, like almost intentionally vague, because I wanted to see what it was going to do with this, just to kind of see the diversity of results. So I said, what's the best way to travel around all 7 continents? Now, what I love about this is that it is breaking down the problem, and you get to see that. And this is one of the challenges I think that we really have with AI, because until now, you have been able to ask a question and it just spits out the answer. And that's not really great for you and I to be able to learn. There is a thought process here. And as the AI gets more adept, more powerful, as it is achieving these constant increments in benchmarks, it is thinking at a PhD level. And let's just be honest, right? Most of us are not PhD educated. I'm not PhD educated. I have a master's degree, but I decided that the master's degree was enough for me, and I got off the education train. I left academia and I went out into the real world to try to make some money. But the thought process that goes on behind the scenes is actually really valuable, because in even a business setting, being able to think critically through a process is one of the most powerful things. And so you get to see every detail of this thought process. No other cloud-based AI system has ever done this before DeepSeek. And again, I think it's largely irrelevant that OpenAI was capable of doing this. They didn't. For whatever reason, they kept it to themselves. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like. They've even updated what O3 does in terms of revealing its thinking. And it's not like this. This is different. And I could actually take a class of students and take them through asking these detailed questions and getting to see the thinking, the way that it breaks down the problem, I think is really valuable. There's a ton of it. Forget about the answer. Just think about how you're approaching the problem, and being able to break that down and analyze it is incredibly powerful. And it's super important for AI mistakes. And I'll come back to that real soon. But let's take a look at what some of the other channels came back with. So just to kind of give you a benchmark comparison, 4.0 mini is sort of the legacy version that's out there. It's the optimized version of 4.0 it's been distilled, right? That's what mini largely means. So it doesn't have everything in it, but it's got a lot of the value, and it runs much more quickly. When you run this is more like an instruct model, right? It's take these steps, and these are the things that you can do. Now, that's a pretty short answer. It gives you a couple of different options. It's not a bad answer, right? But you don't have any idea how it got to this. Going back to DeepSeek, I mean, there's literal pages here. It thought on this for a long time, and it came up with a route plan across visiting each of these, using air travel to get to them to see the world. And then it even provides some suggestions on how you could do that. Getting that with Chat GPT 4.0 mini, it talks about flights. It talks about the same kind of information. And here again is one of those details that we have to talk about, right? Like, we got to the same output. That is kind of curious, right? Like, these things are very similar. That's not fishy at all. Could it be that they have the same basic training data? No, come on. But as we progress through the other models, right, here's O3 mini. It's got a little bit more detail, and it thought for 4 seconds, which it didn't think for very long. They're giving us more detail, right? This is different than what we saw a week ago when O3 mini was initially released. So we've got more detail. So kudos to OpenAI for giving us a little more access and letting us see a little bit more behind the curtain. But this ain't all of it. There's no way. There's way more to discover here than they're letting us see. And if you keep going to O3 mini high, we get a little bit more, right? But this is not even remotely the same as what we're getting out of DeepSeek. I mean, you've got numbers and paragraphs and lots of detailed thought. And that's what I find to be the absolute most valuable. And the answer with O3 mini high is actually a pretty high quality answer, right? I mean, it really is good. And then, of course, if we go to O1, which is really where all of this started, there's tons in this answer. And I would say that actually you probably have a lot more commonality between the thinking process in DeepSeek and the actual full output that you're getting in O1, because some of the things that you were seeing in the thinking about how it was putting it together comes out here. So there is absolutely a connection between O1 and DeepSeek that we cannot ignore. But I don't know. I can't let it go. There's just too much good learning opportunity here with what we see in DeepSeek. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I really think that Anthropic is going to release a model that includes this kind of thinking process. They've not done that yet. So this is what Claude spits out, and this is just a real 3.5 sonnet version 2, right? I don't need to go any more into that. But this week, Google released Gemini. Now, the previous version of Gemini 1.5 Pro, which was the best, gives us, again, it's an okay answer. It's not great. It doesn't really give us any details. But what they gave us this week is something brand new. We got to Gemini 2, and now we have flash thinking. Now, there's a couple of different options. You don't have to do the thinking, and it is still experimental. So Google's very clearly not done, and they developed 2.0, and they've been doing some really good releases here lately. Their pro experimental for complex tasks is kind of fun to play with, but I'm not focusing on that today because I really do think this thinking model direction is where things are going to head, because it just really changes everything. So I really want to praise Google for this, because I think that they have done a good job of implementing this. It seems like they've taken some of the insights from how DeepSeek is thinking, and they're incorporating that into the answer. Now it's very heavy bullets. So it's not the same kind of mental thinking that DeepSeek does. And I still prefer this. I'll be honest with you. For me, this is more how I'm thinking through a problem. I'm not usually thinking in bullets. So I think my biggest objection to what Gemini did is that everything is very bulleted. Now, that makes it really nice for reading. And if there's one thing I've learned in my career of innovation and technology, it's that business people love bullets. Like they don't want a narrative. They don't want an essay. They don't want this consistent lengthy prose where you're just stream of consciousness speaking out. They want hierarchy. They want organization. So this is probably a little bit better in terms of consuming it, right? Because you don't have to read it. You can jump around and look at what you think is most interesting. So I do think that this is a really good product from Google, because they're giving us another view, right? Like this is a delta. So they didn't just take what DeepSeek did and throw it into Gemini. They actually kind of put some effort and thought into this. And what do we think would be better here? What can we do with this? And the bullet points, I think, is another unique thing that they've done. And so now the decision I have to make is what do I actually prefer, and what do I think is safe? I mean, I do have concerns about DeepSeek, honestly. The more I read, unencrypted data being shared across infrastructure, there's some not great things going on there. But you can still experiment and learn with this. There's a lot of opportunity. You don't have to share any private information to use it, and it's still accessible. There are some workplaces that are shutting down access to DeepSeek because they're just too worried about it. There's too much concern. And probably if you work with anything that's at all attached to the government, it's going to get locked down and you're not going to access it. My place of 9 to 5 did shut it down, and it's no longer accessible. But again, there's ways to get around that with the local models and the like. So, I mean, this was a big deal to me. This Gemini release, where it came out with the thinking experimental, was a revelation. And we're going to see this happen with every other provider. Just like I was mentioning earlier, even OpenAI has responded, right? They're giving us more detail. I think we're going to have to keep pushing on them, because there's more to be discovered here. The question is, how long is it going to take them to open that door? The other thing that I got excited about, and I actually just went and ran it in incognito mode just to give you sort of the classic Perplexity answer. I still really prefer what Perplexity gives me from a research perspective, but they too enabled this to work differently, right? So when I do this, I can not only choose to have it do reasoning with R1 and reasoning with O3 Mini, but now they've got Gemini, and it's already there. And I really do think the Sonar model is going to be updated to include this reasoning. But if I flip over to DeepSeek, you'll get to see all of those same details. And what's different about Perplexity is it's been much more agentic in the way that it is prosecuting these tasks. Perplexity has been showing you more from the get-go. Like, you can actually see what it's doing, and then the reasoning with R1 really takes that to the next level. And what's different about the way that Perplexity does it from everybody else is sort of that task list prosecution, and it's actually highlighting the various sources and how it's working through those. So, maybe I'm biased and I just really love Perplexity, but I find this to be a really great way to do it because I have the option to look at it, right? And it's minimizing it so it doesn't have to fill the screen. I don't have to do tons of scrolling to get to the answer I want, but it's giving me a high quality answer. The details are all there. It's very good, and it's organized, right? It's not just text. I'm getting charts and other information. So across these, my winner is still Perplexity, but it's just because I get the best of both worlds. I can do DeepSeek and Perplexity together, and I can change it. So as others are releasing it, right, the Gemini 2.0 flashes here, but we don't have the thinking experimental here yet. Maybe I'll like that one even more when it's available, assuming they ever do make it available. And I fully expect that we'll see something with Sonar in the future as well. Let's jump back over and see how we're doing with our install job here with Pinocchio. So now it's connecting to more resources. I had to click another button and come back to it, but now it wants me to do the install. And we're going to do the install here, and it's going to go out and we're going to complete the process here. And you saw how fast all of this was happening in the background, right? Like, it just made it so easy to get all of this done. It's really terrific. And I have so much fun using these tools because it does all of the hard work for me. Yeah. So as I'm talking about this, some questions are coming in. It's an AI install agent, kind in a way. I mean, so look, let's go. I have a background in infrastructure, so I spent a good portion of my career doing automation, server automation. Basically, I did work exactly like what Cocktail Peanut did here, which is make it really easy to get software installed on a system. In fact, my job in the early days of the enterprise was actually getting bare metal hardware installed with the operating system and all of the requisite enterprise systems that were needed to monitor those servers. So you can imagine in multiple data centers around the world, somebody installs a server in the rack. Well, that gets you the bare metal. Now you've got to get the operating system on it, and you've got to do all of the things necessary to get it set up and configured so somebody can use that to run a system or do development. And so I did all of the work. I spent lots of time building scripts and tools and processes that allowed me to control the configuration of that system and install the things that were needed, validate that it was installed properly and that everything was working. And what you see happening in this window is all of the code around that. And of course, DevOps has brought us a great deal of this level of automation. If you have had the experience of working with the Linux or Unix operating system, that's how all of these things have worked for a very long time. And it's just an automated scripted process where it's updating, it's grabbing the requirements, it's grabbing all of the things behind the scenes to put this together and give you a predictable installation that you can then do something more useful with. So that, I mean, this is really valuable. And if you don't know anything about this universe, this is a great tool because you don't have to know what it's doing here. All of this stuff can be completely ignored by you, so you can focus on what it is that you want to do. You can always come back and look at this and scrutinize it and understand what it's doing in the background. But you can just skip over that. Now, here's the key. Now, this is on the desktop, and I haven't actually installed these things on the desktop computer, so I was actually waiting to do it on the live broadcast tonight. But on my MacBook, Same process, and I was just able to click through it. So now I'm going to install Llama, and it's of course it's going to open up another browser window. So let me bring that over and let you see. And it launches the webpage. It takes you to olama.com, and I can just simply click on download. I'll click on download for Windows. We'll drop that into my downloads folder and save it. And it's really quick. It's not a very big program at all, but it is very powerful. And as soon as that's downloaded, well, okay, 745 megabytes. That is pretty large. I'm spoiled because I have great broadband here at home. Let's see if we can kick off this Olama install, and hopefully it won't lag the connection too much, and you'll get to see this. And let me bring it back over to the window. So I do have to step through the wizard for Olama. It's not going to do all of that for me, but again, it's just clicking a couple of buttons. That, like, there's nothing amazing happening here, and I'm not even configuring it. I'm just letting it take the default installation. Okay. I had to change the adapter. I'm so glad you caught that. Thanks, bro. I could have kept going there for a long time. You know, so let me just jump back a little bit because I think I missed some of that conversation. Appreciate you calling out the problem there. This is live broadcast. You never know what you're gonna get. But in thinking about the mistakes, being able to watch that and see what's happening is super critical because now you can identify the mistakes. You can feed that back into the model after identifying where it went wrong, and that calculus can be carried forward. Carrying forward that calculus is also a really valuable thing because you can talk about anything and you can see where it's doing something different than what you want. So if I'm studying a biblical topic, for example, and that's something that I really got excited about using DeepSeek R1 on the MacBook, was that I could see the reasoning it was using to come to the conclusions about the questions that I was asking. So what's really great about that is that I know where it's making the assertion, and I can go back and say, you looked at this detail and made this assertion, and that's something I disagree with. Go back and recalculate it, but reverse that decision. So we can have a collaborative thinking session. And that's going to open up the door to discoveries in totally new ways. One of the things I learned in my very focused um, time in innovation is that innovation happens in a number of different ways. It's not just the people that are inventing, it's not just the people that are exploring. It is all of them, right? Having this conversation with you on YouTube is a kind of innovation because I'm bringing the discoveries that I'm making and exposing them to you. And who knows what you're going to go and do with the information that you get from me, right? I'm part of the innovation chain, even without having to invent something myself, because I'm drawing attention to those things that I think are important, the discoveries that are important. And as we are able to identify the process, we can also identify the mistakes. And that's the takeaway from the thinking process. The more you expose your thinking, the more you can identify, correct, and learn from the mistakes. And in many ways, being able to do this broadcast with you on a weekly basis is me exposing my thinking about what's happening in the world of AI. And so I also want your feedback, right? I want to know your reaction to what I'm sharing because I also want to know, do you think that my view of this is important or valuable? And I mean, that is part of the dialogue, right? So it's great that you're joining me here to have this discussion. And I want to kind of close out the discussion with kind of two big thoughts, right? You need to get started looking at this. And that's why I'm showing you the installation with Pinocchio because it makes it really easy and you don't have to contend with that. You know, be careful using DeepSeek, you could get 20 years in jail. We say that in jest, but also, I mean, there's some risk there, right? But if you go and download this and you have it on your computer now, it's going to be kind of hard for them to come and rip it off your machine. And honestly, by the time that really happens, we'll have all sorts of other distilled models that we can play with that are giving us that same level of capability. But more importantly, let's talk about the future of AI. What's going to happen? The future of AI is showing your work. There is no doubt. We talked about needing explainable AI for a very long time, and now we have it. And so there is no going back. But that's not even the most important part of it. The most important part of it is that you can use it to correct the mistake and then generate feedback loops, not just for you, but for the models. And so this is really going to change the kind of experiments that we can conduct with AI. You know, if you've looked at all of the industries and the ways that the different industries want to use AI, one of them that's very restrictive is medicine. There are systems out there that are recommending pharmaceutical solutions and medicines for solving a situation, but those systems must, by the requirements of the Food and Drug Administration, expose how it's coming to that conclusion. And so we're going to be able to apply AI in new ways by meeting those requirements. And I think that that is really exciting. But you can then take that information, plug it right back into the model in the form of a prompt, and make even greater discoveries. And that is one of the key things to the mistakes framework. It's not stopping at the mistake, because if you don't keep going, you're never going to solve the problem. And the reality is you don't fail unless you give up. So we're going to have significantly less failures because we're going to be able to pinpoint where the problem is, recalculate, and try again. And I think that that is a really, really tremendous advantage for those of us that are using these systems and making things happen. So really cool stuff there. And I've been talking too much. Well, this installation is still not finished. We still got a little bit more work to do. I'm just going to hang around and finish this installation so you all can see it. So we've got the clock, and at least for you, you're asking for the clock. I do have a little app here that actually lets you see my clock. Let me drag it over so you can actually see what time it is. Here, you got, and it'll even show you what my memory utilization is. I don't know if that may be too small for you to see really well on my screen, but we've got it's showing you how it's updating. We're doing tons of downloading here, so my connection might be a little weak as we're finishing this. But it's live, right? I mean, there is a little bit of lag. We're right at the hour, so we'll just hang out and watch this and finish it up, because I really want you to see what's possible to do with this. And we can go grab the model for Ollama, and it gives us the choice of the DeepSeek models to plug in. And this WebUI makes it exactly like a ChatGPT experience. The WebUI is something that's been developed as an open source project for quite some time, and it really makes it easy for you to work with any of the models. And then what's nice about it, of course, is that you can deploy it on a system that just needs a web browser. So WebUI is cool on a lot of different levels. And if you're doing any kind of development, you don't have to develop the interface. You can grab the components from OpenWebUI. So it's very cool. I'm starting to see a little bit of lag in my video here. Let me see if I can just put this on screen and take me off. Maybe that'll stop the lag. We're almost done with the installation here. So, if you give yourself, 30 minutes to do the install, I think that would be more than enough to get it done. And of course, if you have an older or a smaller system, don't give up, right? Like, being able to see what's possible, I think, is also really valuable. Because in 2025, one of the big predictions I made is that we are going to be able to run models on local devices of all kinds by the end of the year. And it will be really useful. Now, we had the Apple conversation a few weeks ago that their implementation leaves a lot to be desired. But look, what's interesting about that too is it's the worst it'll ever be. It's only going to get better from here. And that's an important consideration to take in as well. This is going to get better in terms of its capability, better in terms of its speed. We've got all sorts of optimizations that are being made across the algorithms and the hardware. And that too is a critical observation. And you're getting improvements in multiple different places. So if you're playing with it now, you get to see, is it any good? So that when it does get good, you can actually take advantage of it and do something with it right away. And that's the other part of this AI mistakes journey, is if you're interacting with this on a regular basis and experimenting with it, you're going to have an opportunity to know exactly when it crosses that usability chasm. When it crosses from the, this is stupid, why am I watching this, to, oh my God, this is amazing, can be a single release. And if you're not keeping an eye on it, if you're not measuring those results and evaluating them for yourself, well, you're going to miss it. So here again, it's showing you everything that it's doing. So you can actually scrutinize every step that it's taking here, but it's just doing all of the work for us. You don't have to figure any of this stuff out. So really, really appreciate Cocktail Peanuts' work in making this available. And of course, there's tons of projects in here. So if you like to tinker with things, it's a really great solution. You do kind of have to have enough storage. But I kind of got crazy with installing models and things. But ultimately, it's a really great tool, and it's one of my favorites. I use it probably of all of the tools that I've been playing with, other than Chat GPT and Claude. This Pinocchio tool has been absolutely the best. Yeah. So Links Pro, we're at 11:33, 11:34 is the time now where I am. So we're about 4 minutes into this install of OpenWebUI, and I think it'll be done here in just a moment. It's got the web UI is now running. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the download models option again, and DeepSeek is the default one here. So if you want to play with the other models, go back to Chatbot Ollama, but this is the only one that I'm after for this open web install. And you see here we've got the 1.5 billion is the first choice, the 7 billion is the second, the 8 billion is the third. Don't bother with 671 billion unless you have really substantial hardware, and you need like cloud compute for that. So don't even bother. My favorite so far has been the 7 billion. So that's the one I'm going to choose. And it's going to go out and grab, using Ollama, DeepSeek R1, and it's already done. So there we have it. We have the model, and it's running, and now I can click Open Web UI, and it's going to open up the browser window for me. And as soon as I can pull that over, you'll get to see it. And here we are. We've got our Open Web UI, and we can get started. You can just go in here and enter your information. This is all local. Okay, so they make it very clear. Open Web UI does not make any external connections, and your data stays on your local server. This is just to make it really clear. And we're just going to finish that, and we'll just throw in a quick password here. They're giving us an update on what's here, and now we're into it, and it's just like a Chat GPT. We go up here and select our model, and we're off and running. I don't know why this isn't working. Maybe I need to restart it. You know what? We're just gonna do this again one more time, because it didn't load the model for some reason. Maybe Ollama's not running anymore. Let me make sure Ollama's running. I can't show it to you, but all I did was click on Ollama and make sure that it's actually in my system tray. I think that was the thing that I had to do. Once it's running, then here, let's stop this, and then we will run Open Web UI one more time. And by the way, once you're done with the window, you can close all of this out. Like, you don't have to keep any of it open. And once it's done and it's in here, you can just go pull it up and open it, and it will start it for you and do the loading for you. So again, it's just like you click on a menu and you're there. You're ready to go. All right, now that's getting started. And there it's running. So now I can do open. And let's see if it's going to work this time. It's not showing up. I must have done something wrong. Let me go look at Olama. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong here. Let's see. Let's try the download models one more time. And if this doesn't work out, then I'll make a separate recording and put it on the channel for those of you that are interested in seeing how this works. So I think this is a really useful thing. I'm sure there's others that have shown this, but I this is just something I really believe in. Is so valuable and important to be able to interact with it. So it doesn't look like it wants to show the model, so we'll have to try that another time. Give it a shot. Try it out, and look, if it's working for you, I'd love to hear. It is the curse of the live stream. You're so right. Yep. And with that, we're over an hour, so I'm going to call it for tonight. But maybe I'll do some editing and get this out so you can see it working. And try that out, and let me know how it's working for you. This is where we live, right? We're living it, making the mistakes, playing with the software, seeing what's working. But it worked flawlessly on my MacBook, so it definitely does work. And maybe something that's unique to my Windows environment here, because I've also got a ton of stuff installed on this rig. And as soon as I figure out what it is, I can share that in the comments as well. But listen, I want to thank those of you that have joined live for being here in the conversation. Really appreciate you joining. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, give me a subscription. Love to hear your comments. Thanks for dropping your comments in the live chat. And say hi on social media sometime. It's good to be here. I hope you're getting good value, and go make some AI mistakes. We'll see you next time. Take care. Have a great week.